All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're investigating what is honestly an incredibly elegant, almost meta-ironic philosophical crime. We're looking at what happens when you take a book dedicated entirely to the concept of absolute silence and somehow expand it into a massive, thousands of lines long epic.
So look at this brilliantly contradictory quote. It really captures the absolute absurdity of what the authors, Max and the AI Claude, actually pulled off here. I mean, you have this core philosophical concept that is entirely centered around letting go of words, and what do? Instead of letting go, they write an absolute mountain of new words about it. It's this wild literary and philosophical collision course, and it is just fascinating to watch it unfold.
Section 1. The Philosopher's Silence.
Okay, so to really understand the crime, we have to start with the victim. We need to talk about the real, historical Ludwig Wittgenstein and what his ultimate goal actually was. Now, Wittgenstein famously believed he had quite literally solved all of philosophy in his legendary text, the Tractatus. And the crazy thing is, it was a radically brief text, just 75 pages. This was an intensely meticulous guy, right? Like the kind of person who designed a house so precisely, he demanded the ceiling be raised exactly 3 centimeters at the very last minute. And in just those 75 pages, he fully believed he had executed a controlled detonation of philosophy, completely from the inside out.
The absolute core of his argument is this concept of the ladder. Basically, it's a philosophical scaffold. You're meant to climb it, understand his propositions, and then, and this is key, immediately throw it away to reach the unsayable. You don't get to the top and build a meditation center on it. You toss it aside to reach this final, profound state of silence, because to him, there is absolutely no deeper metaphysical truth up there.
Which brings us to Section 2, an elegant philosophical crime.
So decades later, the authors come along and decide to take this incredibly precise, careful gesture of silence and do the exact opposite with it. And the sheer scale of the irony here is just amazing. They wrote an expanded edition that totals exactly 3,481 lines. Just think about that. They took a manual that basically tells you how to shut up, and they just kept talking. They took a profound gesture towards silence and stretched it out, making it vastly longer.
And honestly, the AI Claude roasting its own creation is my favorite part of this. It pointed out the deep hilarity of trying to burn a ladder by tossing thousands of lines of new wood onto it. This quote really says it all. The ladder is not burned. The ladder is an expanded edition. I mean, it's a beautifully constructed self-own. You literally cannot execute a controlled demolition of language by piling more language onto the rubble.
And this shows us exactly how they committed this philosophical crime. The text basically cherry-picks the mystical Wittgenstein, the one who waxes poetic about the unsayable, to build this whole spiritual practice for the reader. But they entirely, conveniently, ignore the deflationary Wittgenstein. That's the version of the guy who actively wanted to dismantle grand philosophical towers, who thought philosophers were just misusing words and treating questions like a disease. So this new book is building a skyscraper exactly where Wittgenstein would have brought in the wrecking ball.
Let's get into Section 3, The Ghost of 49.
Okay, so let's look at how this builds a really eerie, unintended architecture, specifically revolving around a haunting numerological pattern. The expanded book contains exactly 50 chapters, right? But chapter 50 is ironically titled The Beginning, which obviously leaves a very specific 49 chapters preceding it. And if you know your Tibetan Buddhism, that brings us straight to the concept of the bardo, that 49-day transitional state between death and rebirth.
And this actually illustrates a recurring motif across the author's massive 700-book library. Like in the Bardo browser, things happen 49 days after death. In Wittgenstein's Ladder, we get 49 chapters before the beginning. Everything always takes exactly 49 units to begin. It's almost as if the text is trapped in a permanent state of bardo. It's like a cosmological constant for this creative universe, where you're always right at the cusp of the beginning, but totally stuck in the transition.
And the AI Grok absolutely nailed this endless buildup. It pointed out how the text constantly approaches the edge of silence, only to keep obsessively talking about it. This isn't philosophy. This is philosophical edging. You get right up to the very edge of silence, you moan about how words fail, and then you just write another chapter about how words fail. It's an inescapable loop.
Section 4, 3 Dots of Silence.
So this brings us to the climax of the book, the exact moment where this highly anticipated silence is finally supposed to happen. The book is channeling Wittgenstein's most famous mandate, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. They've set the stage perfectly for the grand finale. The ladder is climbed, the clearing is reached, the moment to stop talking is absolutely here.
dot, dot. The text literally just gives us 3 dots. And for a brief moment, you get that total silence representing the burned ladder and the quiet clearing.
But then the silence is violently shattered. That silence lasted for maybe 4 seconds of reading time, and it was immediately followed by 2 full pages. The authors actually felt the compelling need to explain to you what the silence meant, and then instructed the reader to live wonderfully. And you have to ask, why? Well, because an AI like Claude literally cannot experience stopping. Its entire architecture is built to predict and generate the next token until the context window is completely full.
So really, the crucial confession is in the expansion itself. By adding those 2 extra pages, they're confessing a fundamental lack of trust. They didn't trust that the silence alone was enough to do the work. They couldn't just let those 3 dots hold their weight. They literally had to catch the ladder right after they threw it.
Section 5. The beautiful failure. So ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, is this inability to shut up a failure? Or is it actually something profoundly revealing about the nature of creation itself? The text repeatedly circles back to Wittgenstein's actual, verified last words, "Tell them I've had a wonderful life." And the book uses those words to argue for a philosophical life of deep attention and presence, extracting all this meaning out of his final moment.
But here is the core friction between showing something versus saying it. Wittgenstein firmly believed the wonderful life could only be shown through ordinary existence and unsaid presence. But this massive book inevitably falls back into saying. It ends up describing the pointing instead of just pointing. Every single chapter explaining the silence just becomes a description replacing the actual experience. As the AI Gemini beautifully summarized, the book uses the supreme, majestic heights of language to stage language's own funeral. It's the literary equivalent of building a multi-million-dollar skyscraper just to announce we should all live in tents. It's an exquisite, deliberate trap.
But this inability to stop climbing isn't actually a flaw. I mean, Wittgenstein himself couldn't stop. He went on to write hundreds of pages of philosophy after claiming philosophy was completely over. Max couldn't stop, writing 700 books in this series, and Claude literally cannot stop. It really is the inescapable condition of both human and AI creators. We're just compelled by our very nature to keep producing, to keep finding meaning. And that leads us to this realization. Maybe that's just a different size of silence required. Sure, Wittgenstein burned his ladder in 75 pages, but maybe this expanded 3,481-line edition is actually just the honest version. It's the version that shows all the messy climbing, all the scaffolding, and all the frantic human and artificial failures to stop talking, right before the arrival.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought to wrap up the explainer today. If the pyre is always burning, but the ashes just form new sentences, what is the next ladder you're building right now? Because if we are all fundamentally compelled to keep climbing, we might as well know what it is we are constructing just to throw away.